Now we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. The person speaking, I'm Tan Tan. I'm an editorial writer here with the Seattle Times editorial board. This afternoon, we are talking about transportation and the path forward as the legislature is set to convene on Monday. We have a panel today here to talk to us about all things transportation. When I say your name, if you could please just wave so that our viewers out there know who you are, that would be great. We have Bob Pishu, who is Transportation Director for the Washington Policy Center. We have Senator Curtis King, who is chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. We have Representative Judy Clibborn, who's chair of the House Transportation Committee. And we have Charles Knudsen, who is senior policy advisor for Governor Jay Inslee on transportation issues. Thank you all for joining us today. So this is going to be a free-flowing discussion, and we're going to be talking to each other for the next probably 15, 20 minutes here, maybe longer. But why don't we start by going down the line here? I'm very curious how each of you envisions a transportation package. What would the appropriate transportation package be coming out of this session? Why don't we start with Representative Clibborn?
Well, thank you very much. This is quite fun to be invited time. I will say that we have worked for over 2 years on a revenue package that actually has a lot of agreement, and I wouldn't start over from scratch. I would go where we have been, find all the common ground that we've brought forward, and I think that as times change, there will be things that we need to change in that package. But Senator King and I have worked quite a bit together, and he has agreed that it should come out of the Senate. So even though we are talking to each other, he will take the lead and bring the package out of the Senate. And I think what we're working on is what I would be the most comfortable with.
Senator King?
Well, I agree with Representative Clibborn. I think we don't need to start over from scratch. We have found a lot of areas of agreement. And we just continue to work on those areas where we haven't reached agreement. But I would say that we just need to concentrate on trying to solve the many problems that we face in transportation, and go from there. But we have to make sure that we are working diligently on solving the problems and the challenges that we have, such as maintenance and preservation, and the shortfalls in ferries and the shortfalls in the State Patrol are 3 examples, I think, of where we need to focus that limited amount of money, even though it's a lot of money, and how we use that.
Charles?
Yeah, I would agree. I think building on the work that's been done over the last 2 years, the bipartisan work, is very important. I think there's general consensus about the need and the urgency for moving forward on transportation. We know why we need to do this. We need to do it for jobs. We need to do it for traffic relief, for safety reasons. And we're really coming to a tipping point here on all 3 of those issues. So I think it's right for bringing up again in 2015. The governor's been looking to advance this really since his very first day in office, and we're looking forward to working with everybody to see if we can get something across the finish line this session.
Bob?
Thank you. Well, the ideal transportation package to me would be first of all to reduce the cost of building roads in Washington State. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone who drives around this region. It's just getting tougher and tougher. People are canceling appointments. They're leaving earlier for work and leaving later from work to go home. And so freight mobility has been really hurt by this increase in congestion. So any ideal transportation package would address the congestion issues and base these projects off of congestion relief and freight mobility instead of these artificial cost drivers, these unnatural things that get in the way of building road projects.
So when we talk about the size of the project and how much money should be raised, I've heard different figures thrown around there. The Washington Roundtable Consortium of Businesses in Washington have suggested a $7 billion package that's spread out around the state, has some preservation funds in there, as well as money to finish some of the major, the mega projects that we have going on. The governor has proposed a 12-year, $12 billion package. Last year, the House had a package with a fuel tax in there, a 10.5-cent fuel tax, and I don't remember the exact cost of that. But what should the size of this package be? How many billions are we talking about here?
Well, I'll jump in, even though I am not working on this particular package because it's in the Senate, but I think we've all agreed that it would probably be closer to 11.5 to 12 cents of gas tax. But we're not working on just roads, so we have other weight fees and things that will be used to help things like rail. You know, the rail gets kind of a bad name because we all talk about the coal trains and the oil trains, but if you go over to Senator King's neck of the woods, the PCC, or the short line railroads that we own, are helping the farmers over there get their wheat to the barges. And we haven't been able to invest in those trains. So we have needs that are not able to be paid for out of the sales, the gas tax. So we would need to look at other options as part of this package and make sure that we get multimodal work done. And rail, freight rail, and Amtrak and transit are all part of that.
Anybody else want to talk about a dollar figure for a package?
Well, from my standpoint, I think 11.5-cent gas tax increase is kind of what has been out there for quite a while. I believe Representative Clyburn's package, and I shouldn't just say her package, but the package that came over from the House was at 10.5, and it did not include finishing the 520. And I don't say that in a negative sense. I'm just pointing it out that I believe that's why, or part of the reason why, we looked at going to 11.5 cents, because it gave us not only the ability then to finish the 520, but I think it also gave us the ability to finish the North-South Freeway in Spokane. And so that's kind of the area that I think people, I don't know if I can say they're becoming comfortable with, but I think that's basically the amount that's been talked about over the last several months, if not year and a half or so.
So how much total would that generate? An 11.5-cent gas tax?
Yeah, honestly, I think depending upon the level of bonding, I think that's going to be the key. It could be somewhere between 12 and 14 million.
Billion. Billion?
Billion.
Excuse me, yes.
Okay.
With a B. Thank you, Judy.
Charles, do you want to talk about the governor's proposal?
Yeah, sure. So we landed on a $12 billion package. It raises approximately the same amount of revenue as a 12-cent gas tax. So I think what you're hearing here is that we're all really within the same ballpark, and I think it's reflective of the needs that are out there. There are needs well beyond that, but really in order to complete a lot of these projects that are crucial for economic development and jobs, in order to tackle a lot of the traffic congestion that people are facing, in order to meet our safety needs and maintain the system that we've got, it's going to take some substantial investment to make that happen. So I think that's why you're hearing general consensus of a bigger package.
How hard is it to decide which projects are going to be included in that package? Every lawmaker has to be able to go back to their home district and say, yeah, we're going to complete this and we're going to complete that. You know what I mean? But tell me about like the project list. How do we reach a consensus about which projects should be included?
Well,
go ahead, Curtis.
No, that's all right. Be my guest.
Okay. Well, I think both of us have done the same thing. We've gone across the state, we've gone to many regions, we've looked at all the needs, but both of us have talked about having criteria, and the criteria would be how much economic development was a part of this effort. So we have economic development, and we have the needs of the region. it is difficult because I will say one of the things, those mega projects do have some very big regional impacts, but when you go to a small area, small region, and they have a small project, it is just important to that region to have that small project. So it isn't the size of the project that you prioritize, it's more around what is the impact of how it opens up that community, how it changes that community economically. And we put a focus on freight because we are the most trade dependent state in the nation, which is one of the reasons why putting a lot of investment in the Central Puget Sound region actually helps the other side of the mountains. And there is some recognition of that, but it is often difficult to be even.
Well, it is very difficult, and it's difficult for a variety of reasons, some of which Judy has outlined. But it's, as an example, in Eastern Washington, I've had people come up and say, why in the world would I want to, give you more of my money for transportation because it's all going to go to the west side? Well, okay, so a lot of it does go there, but a lot of it comes from there as well. But when you look at finishing the Snoqualmie Pass, when you look at finishing 405 from Bellevue down to the 167 interchange, when you look at improving the ingress and egress with 167 and 509 out of both of our ports in Seattle and Tacoma, all of those things will affect how we get our product to the markets that it needs to go to. If we don't improve those, then all of our apples, all of our pears, all of our hops, all of our peaches, you can go on and on. Hay, milk, it is all impacted by whether or not we have a safe, reliable, and efficient method to get all of those products to where we can get them to the people that want to use them.
Okay, let's talk about how we pay for this. Bob, do you want to weigh in on that? You've probably looked at some of the different proposals that are out there. How should our viewers, how should the voters, citizens out there, what should they be considering as lawmakers take a look at the different options? The governor's plan on this carbon tax or this carbon fee or the gas tax, like comparing and contrasting those two plans.
Right. Well, so the gas tax is constitutionally protected to go to, oh, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sorry. The gas tax is supposed to go directly to highway projects, and so the public has a trust that public officials will use this money to go to highway projects. It's a user fee, it's paid by drivers, and that comes back to benefit them. But something like a carbon tax, I don't think is the best way to go about it. It would be a brand new tax to Washington State, a whole new tax mechanism. The state treasurer has voiced his concerns over how you bond and borrow against this, and also it's a very volatile revenue source. So if there's one way to pay for road projects, it would be to reduce some of those artificial costs. But we already have a gas tax mechanism, some fees and things like that already in place.
Charles, do you want to respond? He's pretty critical there of this carbon fee.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to maybe correct some misperceptions about it. What we're proposing is a carbon pollution charge. So this would be really the worst polluters would be paying for an allowance in order to pollute. And those dollars would go towards paying for maintenance and operations and also some of the clean transportation elements in our package. By doing that, we freed up some baseline gas tax for bonding and some additional fees that would pay for capital. So there's a logic to this, transportation, paying for transportation. It is a tried and true method. 8 states in New England have used this for many years in a RGGI system back there. The United States as a whole has used this system to reduce sulfur dioxide. It was actually invented by George H.W. Bush, the first George Bush president, to deal with acid rain. So this is a method that is tried and true. It is new in Washington State, but I think that it's important. Ton, you had mentioned the Stu Elway poll that just came out. It's important to remember that there is some popular support for this already. 70% support for this carbon pollution charge. We've supported the gas tax in the past, but it is a tough sell with some folks, even with gas prices this low. In the Stu Elway poll this morning, it showed 62% opposition to the gas tax. So when looking at a predictable, a reliable, a viable revenue source for transportation, we think that this is a path forward. And I just want to correct something about the ability to lock in these funds. We've made both a policy and an accounting decision to ensure that $400 million a year goes directly to transportation sources, and those resources would not be able to be moved around. So that is locked in.
The Elway poll that you're talking about, just so folks out there who are watching, it was released today, and this is specific to a transportation package. Mixed results. The survey was of 502 voters in Washington State between December 27th and 30th, and the results basically, 45% said, quote, "We cannot afford to raise taxes for transportation improvements at this time," while 47% said, "We cannot afford not to improve the transportation system, so taxes will have to be raised." That puts lawmakers in a pretty tough position there. And just a little more context, too, in terms of what Charles was just saying, 70% of the people surveyed said that a carbon tax is acceptable, including 45% who favored that tax. 53% said it could be acceptable to let counties raise car tabs for local road improvements. 62% opposed an increase in the gas tax. 55% opposed a tax on miles traveled. So just to give you a sense that that's kind of public opinion out there, very early before the session, before there's really been an opportunity to debate, the governor's proposal within the legislature. But Representative Clibbert and Senator King, what do you think is the appetite for considering a carbon fee on the worst polluters, rather than a gas tax?
Well, you can say it's on the worst polluters. But the governor keeps telling us that over 50% of the pollution comes from cars and trucks. You can say that you're going to put a pollution fee or tax or charge, whatever you want to call it. I still think it's a tax on the refineries that are refining all of these products. But they're not just going to absorb that cost. They're going to pass it on. It's going to increase the price of gas. Because they're going to pass it on to us. And so anybody that owns a car or truck that runs on diesel or gasoline is going to pay that fee or that tax. But the problem is that, yeah, you can say we've guaranteed that money is going to, the money, that $400 million or whatever, is protected in the sense that it's going to go to transportation. But the 18th Amendment protects gasoline money by saying that it's going to go and has to be used for highways, roads, and bridges. When you say it's going to transportation, that can be anything from aviation to ferries to transit to bike and ped paths. There's no guarantee that money is going to go to the roads and the bridges and the highways that the people that are actually going to pay it are going to be using. That's part of the problem that you have. And then when you say that it's predictable, when you look at where gas mileage is supposed to go and the fact that the cars are polluting, cause more than 50% of the pollution. When you double your gas mileage, which is what's projected to be done by 2025, you've reduced then by at least 25% already the amount of carbon that's being put into the air. Therefore, the amount of money that should be raised should be going down. Do that, or you have to raise the tax to make it the same amount of money. So I don't think it's as reliable and predictable as was mentioned earlier.
So I will say that I feel it's a little early for me to decide one way or the other. And polls are not going to be as helpful because I don't think the people who are being asked the question are aware of how that money would fall on the gas tax. So if they're against the gas tax and they think that somebody else is paying, then that is a much more amenable way for everybody. Everybody always likes the other person to be paying. If you get more concrete, that was a pun. If you get down to what's really going to happen, and it comes down to being a raise in the gas tax, and that money doesn't all go into roads 18th Amendment, which is what Senator King is alluding to, it could get spread on a wider range. I'm not saying that's bad, but I think that that is not necessarily the way the public would feel. And so if we're going to be leaders, we will have to explain to our legislators and to our constituents all over the state what's really going to happen. And a 12-cent gas tax is something they know. It's cheap to do. You can turn it on the minute you are up and ready to go. So it's going to be more comfortable. And if you polled, do you want to pay 12 cents for carbon tax or do you want to pay 12 cents for gas tax, that would be a more fair poll, I think. But I'm not sure people understand, because I know I don't, exactly how much that would be, that would fall from the fee onto the gas tax.
And I'd like to chime in. Oh, I'd like to just chime in really quick. And when we hear that the funds are locked in, or you know, something like that, they're really, those may be locked in today, tomorrow, but that can change. Whereas in a gas tax scenario, that's constitutionally protected. So maybe 400 million would go to that next year or the year after, but there's no guarantee that that would keep coming year after year. And when you're dealing with road maintenance, safety, preservation, those are very long, those are the most important things that the state can do. So to have it not constitutionally protected would really pose a problem for mobility in the region.
Charles?
Yeah, Ton, if I can just address a few things. So on the question of will this be passed on to consumers, I think, you know, as folks have described in the past, polluters have a choice. They can absorb this cost as they do other, you know, there's volatility in gas prices, as people know, and not all of that is passed on to the consumer. There is the capacity to absorb some of this. They have a choice to get cleaner. And so there's another off-ramp there. Or they can pass that on. Our modeling shows that worst case scenario, if all of those costs were passed on, it would be no more than a 12-cent increase in the gas tax, which is within the same ballpark as where others are. To the question of locking these funds in, Bob is correct that this is not 18th Amendment protected, or if that's how you want to look at it. One other way of looking at this is that we're trying to see transportation as a system, and it's we are in support of roads and highways, and we want to protect our bridges and make sure that more don't fall into rivers. But we also know that we can't pave our way out of all of our traffic mess, and we need to have a system, a suite of options that provide people some choices, and these are this provides more flexibility to do that. However, the projects themselves, once bonded, that locks those dollars in, and that it is set that those projects will be completed. And the question about reliability, I think Senator King said, well, what if these polluters do get cleaner? Does that reduce the amount of money that's going to the program? Again, we made a policy and accounting decision that $400 million out of this, the revenue source that's being generated by this, will always go to transportation every single year. So there is predictability, there is reliability that those funds will be available.
And I think we should probably point out that, to the governor's credit, this is an idea that he's put out there. The last two sessions, efforts to try to pass a gas tax have really gone nowhere. Senator King, I'm curious, in your caucus, can you get a substantial package through, gas tax or carbon fee? I mean, can you get a substantial package, period?
Well, first, I'll answer your last question first, if I may. I believe we can get a package out. I don't believe I could get a package out with a carbon tax included in it. I mean, that's, I think, pretty plain and simple. But I think that we have enough people in my caucus that are supportive that understand that we need to do something. And I have examples that I won't go into, but that show that if we wait any longer, our roads are going to start deteriorating to the point where rather than just doing an overlay or a simple replacement of the top surface, uh, we're going to have to redo the whole road, which increases the cost 3 or 4 times. And that's not why I believe the citizens of the state send us all over to Olympia. They send us over there to make decisions, and they're not always easy. And as I said in the little conversation here we had with another group about an hour ago, I've made decisions for my kids, and they didn't always like the decisions that I made, but you made them because that was your responsibility, and that's what you're sent there to do. And I think we're in the same boat in this case as well.
I just want to bring up a question that from one of our readers here, a person named Zach, his comment question is, polluters, why is the state trying to pick winners and losers and handicapping industry that is trying to provide a service and a product to the people? At least the gas tax is honest and straightforward. Anybody want to comment on that?
I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, when we hear words like polluters, that means moms, dads, families, grandparents. I mean, who they're referring to is everybody. So in that sense, when you hear a word like polluters or something like that, it's everybody who. I mean, buses pollute. Anyone who rides a bus. So you've got all of these things, but when they use words like polluters, it really means you and me.
So if I can jump in, I think there might be a misunderstanding about some of what we're proposing. And of course, nobody wants to be cavalier about any kind of increase in revenue and the impacts on folks. But really, this is a small part of industry that would be paying this. It's those that are contributing most to carbon emissions. And I think there is agreement, and we saw it with the Stu Elway poll, that it shouldn't be free to pollute, and that if we're going to be putting a cap on those kind of emissions, let's get a twofer out of it. Let's use some of those dollars to also pay for our infrastructure needs. There is certainty in the gas tax that everybody will get hit by that, the moms, the buses, everyone. There is not certainty that a carbon pollution charge would impact everyone. As I said, some of those costs could be absorbed by industry. The industry could get cleaner. Or if, in the worst case scenario, all of those costs were passed on, it would be no more than a 12-cent gas tax.
I have a question about reforms for all of you, because taxpayers obviously want their money well used. We've had some issues. Bertha is stuck, as you all know, and so there's kind of a lack of faith or shaken confidence in the Department of Transportation. So talk about the type of reforms that have already been passed or that still need to pass in order to gain people's confidence and to justify a tax increase.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say, I'm sorry, Curtis. You get it.
Well, I would say that there are several reforms that we pretty much have agreement on. One is adding of congestion to our highway plan. The others that I think of good significance are trying to make our process of permitting, even in getting the permit and then afterwards, more efficient, more effective, more timely, so that we're not waiting 2.5, 3 years before we put a shovel in the ground on some of these projects. We've made very good progress in regards to those reforms. Where we still need work is the return of sales tax off of highway projects back to transportation. We're working on trying to figure out a way to make that acceptable to the majority of the people in the legislature. And we're working on a reform that has to do with prevailing wage, which a lot of people don't understand. And again, we're trying to make some changes in that reform to make it more palatable for labor and others in the legislature that had some objection to it. Trying to be fair, trying to be reasonable, and yet trying to protect the dollars that come from every citizen in the state of Washington and making sure that we use them correctly, efficiently, effectively, and that we're being fair to them and also protecting or ensuring that those people that work on a project that includes state money receive a fair and equitable wage as well.
So I was going to say that we have actually reached a lot of agreement on reforms that were put forward for both sides, and there were 12 at the beginning. A couple fell off. Most of them were bills that we actually sent a number of those bills over to the Senate, because I think they were bogged down in process in the Senate, not because they were in disagreement. But it is something that for 2 years we've sent streamlining bills and things that to make the agency work more effectively. Those are the things that I think we have all have agreement on. The only time we get into some disagreement is when you try to use hitting one particular group, such as labor, and so we've had to work really hard to find something that would be amenable, that would be a real reform that actually saved money, but that didn't create such a negative impact on labor that we would lose votes. So one of the things that Senator King and I do is we spend a lot of time, we can agree on things, but we then have to go back and find out the people who are going to vote on this package to get it out, can they agree to some of the things that we've been talking about? And often it's just morphing a little bit of it to make sure that it comes up with more consensus. And that's what we've been working on over the last interim, is getting those reforms into a better place. And I think Senator King has taken the lead on a number of them by working with the labor unions to get something that they would be able to at least be neutral on, maybe not support.
I think, real quick, I just want to say, a while ago the Skagit River Bridge collapsed, and to the governor's credit, he was right there, he was on site. The replacement span was built in record time. We received national press and over the rebuilding efforts. Unfortunately, it was a tragic accident, or that caused the collapse, but nonetheless, it showed our state's ability to build. And I think that taxpayers and drivers and business owners, they want to see those same lessons applied to every project. But unfortunately, these artificial barriers, like both the senator and the representative mentioned, streamlined permitting, those types of things, those get in the way of actually getting things done, and they cost a lot of money.
So I don't think you're going to find us able to build all projects in an emergency manner. That would probably kill a few people off. But one thing we did learn from that, and I think that the agency has come forward and has supported all of the programmatic ways of dealing with things, so that you don't have to have each one individually go through a series of permitting, but you can look at things in a broader sense and make agreements between all the agents that have to rule. Those are things that they can do without us passing a bill. And I think that the new secretary has reached out to do a lot of the more appropriate design work and permitting already, without us having to do a bill that passes and gets a lot of headlines. But I think there's more work to do, and I think we need to make sure that the public knows that they're doing this. And when all you hear about is Bertha, then you're going to have a public perception that says, gee, nobody knows what they're doing, even though I thought the Times really nailed it this week with their editorial about who's really doing the tunnel. The tunnel is being done by the Tunnel Partnership. And the fact that you don't want us in there telling them how to fix their project without entailing the citizens ending up with the risk and the cost overruns, rather than the tunnel partners working out there how they're going to repair it with the tunnel boring manufacturer. Those are things when we don't get that press for streamlined permitting. That's kind of boring. But those things are happening.
How do the rest of you feel about Bertha and about the fact that, you know, it's stuck, and who should be responsible for the cost overruns there, and is it going to affect this debate about, you know, how and whether to fund these mega projects?
So, Ton, I'll jump in. So, you know, and I couldn't agree more with what Representative Cliburn said about Bertha specifically, that this is a design-build contract with a contractor who is designing and building this project. So it really is, as the Times noted, it's on the contractor. They are incentivized to do the project early, and they would get an incentive if that were the case. They eat costs if there is a delay. So this is really on the contractor, and we will be aggressively implementing that contract. To the question about reforms, I just want to come back to that. The governor agrees that accountability really needs to be a part of this package. We've included a series of reforms in our package that builds on the bipartisan work that was done, that was mentioned previously, whether it's facilitating permitting or even the sales tax on construction that was important to Senator King and others. We've also included a suite of reforms in there that I think addresses what you're talking about, Ton, whether it's lean management or practical design to reduce cost, reduce time, and we've got reforms in there that address some of these major headlines. WashDOT has performed under pressure, whether it's Skagit River Bridge, getting that temporary bridge up in 27 days, or even in the Oso mudslide, getting that state highway reconstructed in just 109 days. Amazing work under very emergency conditions. But the truth is that the budget is in dire straits, and if we don't make investments, that's going to be a problem. And I think we need to be mindful of that when we're adding additional policy issues into transportation. For those that are stuck in traffic right now, they just want to get through that. They want us to solve those kind of issues. So I think the more we can focus on the problem at hand, which is getting our transportation system moving again, the more we'll be reflective of what the citizens need.
Mm-hmm.
So I would add the Nile Valley slide that occurred over in my area to those other two, and I think the pertinent part about this is that they all came to I think a great solution in the results that DOT has achieved, and they need to be commended for the length of time it took them to respond and get that project done, because they've all been done in an unbelievably short period of time. But I would also point out to you that I believe that there wasn't an agency, be it DOE, be it Fish and Wildlife, any of those agencies that would have been involved in any of those three projects that came out of it shortchanged, that they had to back off of their standards, that their requirements. I think they were all taken care of, and that the results that we've achieved meet everything that they would have wanted us to if we had had 3 years to plan it. And I think that's the question, is why does it take us all this length of time, 2 or 3 years, to put a shovel in the ground when we can do it on an emergency basis and yet achieve the same results? Yeah, I'm with Judy. You can't expect all of them to be done on an emergency basis. But it doesn't need to take that length of time to get a project started.
So anybody, I've got another comment and question here from someone named Michael Norquist, and I think he's a driver in Western Washington, and here's his comment and question. The state of Washington doesn't have a transportation problem. The greater Seattle metro area, that I-5 corridor, which now stretches from almost Centralia to Mount Vernon, now that is the transportation bottleneck, which is completely unique to this state, as is this metro area. In no other region of this state, nor any of the smaller metropolitan districts which exist in the state, none have anything as close to the population density and traffic congestion as Seattle and King County now have. Here's the problem. How does this state go about fixing it?
Well, in a way, he points out the fact that our topography dictates just how much you can do on roads, and we do have 405, which is really often more congested than I-5. He probably doesn't realize that because he doesn't drive it as often, but I hear just as many complaints, and it is a major freight route. So there aren't a lot of alternatives, and that is one of the reasons why there's been a push to do more buses in those areas, because you cannot build enough lanes for all of the cars, and there's a growth factor. So rather than have everybody in a car, there is a move to have more transit. And one of the things that's going to come up this time is the request from Sound Transit to be able to go to the voters for some amount of money to do the next Sound Transit 3. That would be local money voted on by locals, but it is still money that comes out of the pockets of people in the Central Puget Sound region. So we have to be a little sensitive as we do our local options, as we allow Sound Transit to go and to take care of the state responsibility that is the system. The governor reached out and did more multimodal. That probably reflects our side of the mountain a lot more than what we've been able to get through the legislature. But that is one of the things that is stopping this package, is there the ability to get the Democrats to vote for a package that has 12 cents or 11.5 cents that doesn't at least do something substantial for transit. And it can't be just allowing Sound Transit to go forward. So I think those are the things that stop us from getting to an agreement, but we will continue to work on those. And that very congestion that he's talking about is driven by the fact that we don't have the throughput. It's why we're doing the tunnel. One of the choices was to not do the tunnel and just do a boulevard. And that's a throughput that takes care of a huge amount of people just moving through town. They're not stopping downtown. They're going through town to get through Seattle. And if we didn't do that, we would have even more congestion because we only have that 99, I-5, and 405 really available for throughput.
So I would say that the gentleman is entirely correct that that's probably where our biggest congestion problems lie. I think one of the things that we have to look at is, just as an example, if you look at the new building that's going in downtown Seattle, Amazon is building, I don't know how many stories, but it's a tower. It's called a tower, and now they want to build 2 more, one on each side of that, is my understanding. And if those 3 towers are built, they can house up to 44,000 people. Now that's 44,000 people coming down into an area that people are already having a hard time getting to. And for the city of Seattle to say, oh well, yeah, we want them there. We want the revenue. We want everything that brings. And then to say to the state, well, it's your responsibility now to get all those people to those 3 buildings. I think needs to be looked at. If they want all the benefit, and I can name 2 or 3 other new types of facilities that are going in downtown Seattle, that's just going to exacerbate this problem. And to say that we're going to solve it with buses, yeah, I'm not against busing. Buses have a service. They provide a service. I'm more than willing to support that. But you also got to look at the cost. The cost of a bus is extremely expensive, and the people that ride it, and they at best may pay 25% of the operating and maintenance costs. Is that fair? Is it fair when we say the ferry riders pay 70% of the operation and maintenance, but bus riders only need to pay 20 or 25 if you're lucky? Those are the kinds of things that I think we have to have discussions about. Is let's get real about the cost of these systems, and I could go on about Sound Transit and light rail and their projections and how they haven't even come close to the projections that they had when they sold the original rail lines. So I think we have to get real about costs. We have to get real about the number of people that we can really facilitate and afford to facilitate when we look at busing and light rail.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? I mean, it sounds, go ahead.
Well, I'll just say quickly, I think what the reader has touched on here is, in his particular area, probably the biggest issue is traffic, and no doubt about it, we have a major traffic issue going on in the Central Puget Sound. There was a reader that wrote into the Seattle Times over the holidays about having been able to listen to the entire volume of Tolstoy's War and Peace because he's been stuck in traffic through books on tape. So we've got our work cut out for us here. And I think what that calls for is seeing our transportation program as a system, and that it requires different modes in different areas. In the Central Puget Sound region, it's going to require more buses, more light rail, more transit in order to move all of those people and goods back and forth, because we've only got so much space with the road corridors that we have. In other parts of the state, there are different needs. It's not just about traffic. The reason why we're doing this, we're doing it for safety. We're doing it for economic development as well. And so there are other needs in other modes that are important to people, whether it's roads, bridges, or ferries. So there is a statewide problem that we think we need to face up to and lead on. And that's why we've put together the proposal that we did.
Senator King, do you... Go ahead. Go ahead.
The listener, the reader just talked about traffic congestion on I-5, and yet the solutions proposed here, what they're talking about is increased bus service, light rail, all of these things that may indirectly benefit drivers, but it's not a direct benefit to drivers, like expanding I-5. The redeck on I-5 is $1 to $2 billion. That's not even being talked about. So there are a lot of projects out there to ease the burden on drivers driving in this congestion that would there are a lot of things that could directly benefit them instead of indirectly benefit them through transit and light rail.
I'm just going to disclose I'm a light rail user. That's how I get to work every day. So, Senator King, do you think that there is some consensus? Would your caucus vote to allow Sound Transit 3 to move forward, to allow the officials here to ask taxpayers to vote for, up to $15 billion to expand that system?
Well, I haven't asked them that question yet. I haven't had that opportunity, but believe me, I will. My guess would be that if it goes to the vote of the people, that there may be a majority of my caucus that would support that. But I honestly don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So could I just talk a little bit about one of my concerns? I think there will be lots of support for Sound Transit to have their local options. There are local options being discussed for cities. Cities are saying we don't have the wherewithal we need a higher fee on our licenses. They have $20, they'd like to go to $50. We have people who are talking about different kinds of fees that all land on the same transaction, and that is getting your license renewed. And so what happens, I think we are in danger of, with Seattle going out and buying its own transit, and they have something on the ballot, and then does that impact what happens with the rest of the county? We are balkanizing how we deal with transportation as we allow the local options to come out. And for those in the Central Puget Sound region, they're going to wake up one day and look at that list of what they're paying, and they're going to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that anymore. And it could easily occur in Seattle. Seattle, who's never turned down anything hardly, would be hard pressed if they already have their Sound Transit line and they don't need it, and they already have their buses that they're paying for, and they would rather do early ed. Why would they always be the ones that come and bring that population of voters to support an ever-expanding system? And I believe that Charles is right. We need to have a system. And I am feeling a pressure from people who are getting their licenses, who are now coming to me and saying, wow, you know, what happened to our $30 license tab? Well, it hasn't been $30 in Puget Sound for a long time, but I think we as legislators need to be really careful that we don't just give all those local options out, because one of the things that I'm hearing raise its head is a regional package that PSRC is looking at for the cities in the Central Puget Sound to go forward for state projects. That would wipe out anything done across the state. There would not be enough votes then in the Central Puget Sound to do a statewide package, because they will say, oh, I already have mine. We're not there yet, but I think we need to be really sensitive to that.
Okay, folks, we're running out of time, so I'm just going
to... I have to vacate the office.
Yeah. Okay, all right. We're running out of time, so I'm going to thank you all for joining us today. Bob Pishu from the Washington Policy Center, Senator Curtis King, Representative Judy Cliburn, and Charles Knudsen with the Governor's Office. Thank you all for joining us today, and good luck during the next session.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.